In this video, we'll learn about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's art project grants for fiscal year 2027, which runs from July 1st, 2026 through June 30th, 2027. The intent of the Art Project Grant Program is to encourage the creation, performance, and appreciation of the arts in the community. So this grant will cover most arts programming that an organization is doing. The grant is available for up to $10,000, and our funding from that comes from the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage or Legacy Fund and Minnesota State General Funds. Applicant organizations need to be located in Southwest Minnesota Arts Council or SMOC's service area, which covers 18 counties and 2 tribal nations. These include Big Stone, Chanshayapi or Lower Sioux, Chippewa, Cottonwood, Jackson, Candy, Ojai, Lac-Qui-Parle, Lincoln, Lyon, McLeod, Meeker, Murray, Nobles, Pajutazizi or Upper Sioux, Pipestone, Redwood, Renville, Rock, Swift, and Yellow Medicine. We acknowledge that the Southwest Minnesota region occupies the traditional, ancestral, and contemporary lands of the Dakota people. Art project grants are open to 501c3 nonprofit organizations, units of government like city, county, and tribal government, and public schools with a community-focused project. If your organization is operating in the spirit of a nonprofit but doesn't have its 501c3 status yet, you can apply using a fiscal sponsor, which is an organization that does meet our eligibility requirements, and that organization would receive and manage your project funds for you. If you use a fiscal sponsor, your application will need to include an agreement that outlines how the relationship between your 2 organizations will work, and someone from the fiscal sponsor organization will need to sign your application and subsequent grant documents. Projects may include many kinds of activities like music or dance performances, which could be by community groups or professionals brought into the community theater, visual art exhibits, readings by authors, art classes for community members of all ages, public art, and arts festivals. If you are an arts organization, you also can include prorated operating expenses in your request. An example of that would be an Arts Council's request for their yearly exhibit series, including a proportionate amount of rent, utilities, staff time, etc. that would take place during the time frame of their project. No more than 40% of your grant request can go toward operating expenses. And organizations that have average annual expenses of $174,000 or more, which would make them eligible for Minnesota State Arts Board operating support, cannot include operating expenses in this art project request. A little more clarification about what is being counted as operating versus project expenses. Operating expenses are those expenses that are necessary to operate your organization, regardless of whether you're doing specific programming or not. If you imagine a month where you have no programming happening, what expenses would you still have? And those would be your operating expenses. Organizations that have a physical space or staff will have more of these kinds of operating expenses. Program or project expenses would be expenses for a particular project. If you were not doing this project, you would not have those expenses. We had a recent workshop on this topic, all about how to request operating expenses within your art project grant, and you can find a recording of that workshop on our website. Also be aware that we have an overall funding limit for organizations, which is $20,000 per year in grant funds across all of our programs. So this may require your organization to do some planning at the beginning of the year to figure out what your priorities are to apply for during the year. The following activities are not eligible for these grants: projects that don't have an art focus, activities of a for-profit project organization or business, Educational projects within a school system. We have a separate program, Arts in the Schools, for those kinds of projects. Activities that take place outside of Minnesota are not eligible because we are using state funds for these grants. Also ineligible are activities not open to the public, religious socialization of the participants or audience. Fundraising events are also not eligible. In other words, the grant funds are meant to help your project break even, not to make a profit, and you also cannot fundraise for another cause as part of your project. Also ineligible are payments of debts incurred before the grant begins, budgets that include general contingency expenses, grant funds being used to match another SMOC grant. If you have received a direct Minnesota legislative appropriation or legislatively mandated grant from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund for fiscal year 2027. So this would be funding that is allocated directly to your organization by the Minnesota State Legislature. And finally, applicants with a past due final report still outstanding are ineligible. We have planned 4 deadlines over the course of the year for the Art Project Grant Program. And round 1 has a deadline of July 15th, 2026, with an earliest project start date of September 1st. Round 2 deadline is October 21st, with an earliest project start date of December 1st. Round 3 deadline, January 20th, 2027, with an earliest project start date of March 1st, 2027. And round 4, April 14th, 2027 deadline, June 1st, earliest project start date. For all of the deadlines, applications need to be submitted by 11:59 p.m. through our online grant system. This time is new for us this year. We've given you a little more time on the deadline date to complete and submit your applications. You'll need to choose both a start and end date for your project. In choosing your start date, you'll first want to check for the earliest allowed start date for that round, knowing that you can't start any project activities before that date. And these activities would include things like ordering supplies, holding auditions or rehearsals, doing any advertising, whether or not it's paid for by the grant funds, any payments to artists, etc. So you can't spend any funds before that start date. If there is something that you would need to spend money on before that date, if you had to make a deposit on a contract, that amount cannot be included in your grant project budget. Then in choosing your project end date, make sure to give yourself plenty of time to both complete the project and to evaluate it. Projects that are awarded in fiscal year 27 must be finished up by June 30th of 2028. In preparing to fill out your application, these are the kinds of questions you'll need to answer and materials you'll need to gather. You will need to describe your project activities and provide event details. You'll need a description of the artists or artistic works that are going to be involved in your project, along with your rationale for choosing them. You'll also need resumes and bios from your artists, along with work samples, and information about other key non-artist personnel for the project. You'll need to share your plans for reaching underserved or underrepresented communities through your project, along with proposed project outcomes and an evaluation plan. A few more things that you'll need to include are estimated audience numbers, your planning and marketing schedule, the support and collaborations that you're expecting from within the community, an itemized detailed budget, an organization summary and list of your board members, some demographic and organization data, and contact information for your project director and authorizing official. As you work on your application, we suggest that you don't use AI. It's best to write in your own words since you're the one that knows your project details, which are more important than writing style. So you will need 2 individuals connected to your request. First is the project director, and that would be the person who's most directly responsible for the day-to-day activities of the project. And then your authorizing official would be someone who has authorizing power for your organization, like a president or treasurer. These roles need to be filled by 2 different people, and both of them will need to sign all of your grant documents, including the application. Here are the criteria that the reviewers will be looking at when they are scoring your application. They will look at the artistic quality and merit of your project, worth 50% of your score, the impact that it will have on the participants and audience, worth 22% of your score, your efforts to reach the underserved and underrepresented in your community through the project, worth 14% of your score, and your ability to accomplish the project, also worth 14% of your score. In more detail, for artistic quality and merit, they will look to see that your activities have high artistic merit and potential for participants to develop knowledge, skills, and understanding of the arts. They will look to see if the artists involved have an appropriate level of experience and whether that artist's work shows technical skill and artistic vision or voice. It can be difficult to rate artistic quality, but we're asking our reviewers to look for authenticity or originality, technical skill, personal artistic vision or voice, professional commitment, and work that brings forth some sort of response from those experiencing it. If you are working in folk, traditional, or cultural art, the reviewers will be looking for authenticity, technical skill, commitment to the art form, and recognition from the community to which that art form belongs. For the next criterion, reaching the underserved, the reviewers will be looking to see that you have been able to identify underserved or underrepresented groups in your community and are making specific attempts to reach out to and involve at least one of those groups in your project. They will also look at your efforts toward ADA accessibility. For impact on participants and audience, reviewers will look to see the project's importance to the community, whether it is meeting the community's artistic needs. They'll also look to see whether the project shows growth for your organization and/or the community. They will also see whether you have identified proposed changes to take place as a result of your project and have plans to measure whether those changes have taken place or not. And finally, for your ability to accomplish the project, the reviewers will look for an appropriate timeline, budget, and marketing plan, ample community support, and evidence of a strong organization, board, and non-artist personnel. SMOC staff can offer assistance in several ways as you work on your application. First, we can talk through your project with you before you get started to make sure that you are applying under the right grant program and that your project is eligible. You also can get answers to any questions you may have as you're filling out your application. You can also have SMOC staff review your application draft. If you let us know about 2 weeks before the deadline, we can take a look at your application and let you know if you're missing anything, if there's anything the reviewers might find confusing, and just give you some general feedback. So if you have time to take advantage of that, that can be a very helpful opportunity. We also have many resources available for you on our website. You will find for each of our grant programs the guidelines and criteria, important dates, including when you will find out whether you have received a grant or not, and also application and report questions in an editable format so you can see what those involve before starting anything. We also have instructional videos available, including a tutorial on how to use the online grant system, another tutorial on how our grant process works in general, along with several grant writing related topics such as reaching underserved and underrepresented communities and putting together your grant goals and evaluation plan. There are also sample documents available on the website. You can see what a contract looks like. For organizations, there's a sample fiscal sponsor agreement. You'll also find the credit lines and logos that you may need to use in promoting your grant project. There is also the login to our online grant system, and you can find multiple ways to connect with SMOC staff. Thanks for learning about Southwest Minnesota Arts Council's grants. Please contact us with any questions or visit our website for more information.